Hello, and welcome to 6 Logical Fallacies. If you're in my CT class, this is the last 6. We are getting to the top of the mountain. But if you are looking for this just because you are studying the logical fallacies, there are also a few goodies to find in here. In this slideshow, we will be covering confusion of necessary with sufficient condition. Okay? The fallacy of division. And we're including in that the fallacy of composition too. We're not really considering them different things since they're kind of the same idea backwards and forwards. We'll be talking about the is-ought fallacy, argument from ignorance, a favorite of mine because I get to mention aliens, fallacy of the continuum, one that every shopper should know, and in the end, phantom distinction, a bad excuse that you should be able to recognize. All right, so we're starting off with confusion of necessary with sufficient condition. Now let's say you want to bake this cake. Well, there are some things that are necessary for baking that cake, including maybe flour, sugar, eggs, frosting. But none of these things are sufficient. Sufficient means enough on its own. You can't bake a cake with just flour. You can't bake a cake with just sugar, okay? So these things are necessary, but not conficient. Now the fallacy happens in real life, which is more complicated than cake baking, when it's a little bit more confusing what's necessary and what's sufficient, and you're trying to kind of pass off something necessary as all you need. So, for example, I got an A on the midterm, so I know I'll get an A in the class. Well, getting an A on the midterm is probably necessary for getting an A in the class, but it's not sufficient. You'll probably have to get an A on the final too, and whatever other big projects there are if you want to have an A average. Okay, but we like to think that. Here's one you're hearing a lot these days, in various forms. We just need a good antibodies test, and then we can reopen the whole economy. Or, we just need the numbers of hospitalizations per day to decline, and then we can reopen the economy. Or, many others I can list. Okay. The fact is, we're going to need several things in place before we can open the economy. I'm creating this video during the pandemic, okay? It's not going to be just one thing. This is a confusion of necessary, something that's necessary, with sufficient, something that's enough. And all you have to do is turn on the TV news to find this one. Now let's imagine we're in a courtroom. My client owns the same brand of knives as the murder weapon, so clearly she is guilty. Okay. It may be that the person who actually committed the crime owned one of those knives. Yep. So it may be a necessary condition for the guilty person, but clearly it's not sufficient. I bet thousands of people bought those knives. Okay. So the lawyer's trying to pass off something necessary as sufficient. Okay, the fallacy of division is when we get confused between the part and the whole and the whole and the part. Just because the part is one way, the whole has to be the same. Not necessarily true. Or just because the whole in general is some way, the part has to be the same. Again, not necessarily true. Use some silly examples, and then we'll do something a little more serious. So here's some silly examples that will make it clear why this reasoning is not logic. Part of this flag is red, therefore the whole flag is red. Well, obviously not. It is a beautiful rainbow flag. This teddy bear is soft, therefore its eyes are soft. Well, if you've cuddled up to a teddy bear in your life, you know that the eyes are often hard plastic, the only part of it that's not soft. Here, in the first one, we made an assumption about a part and tried to apply it to the whole. That didn't work. Here we made a statement about the whole that's true in general, but then tried to apply it to every single part. Not true. Note that this is very like overgeneralization if you think of people as part of groups. So sometimes this fallacy can look a lot like stereotyping, just like overgeneralization can. Yo-Yo Ma is an amazing musician, therefore all Asians are amazing musicians. Yeah, you're looking at Yo-Yo Ma as a part of something, of a whole, which is Asians, and making an assumption that the part is the same as the whole. Obviously not a true statement, not logic, okay? Stereotyping is not logic, even when you're saying something good about the group of people. And it's still harmful, even when you're saying something good, because you are setting up expectations that will not be met in real life. So it also doesn't work in real life when you go from whole to part. This is a great cell phone company, so any job I get here will be great. Well, scrubbing out the toilets still might not be that great, even if the company is great in general. So you can't make that generalization. You can't go because the whole thing is great. Every single part of it must be great. Okay? That is obviously not logic. All right, and it is the fallacy of division. And to remember that name, think about you're dividing the whole into parts, whether you're going from part to whole or whole to part. That's fallacy of division. Okay. Next is the is-ought fallacy. So first of all, the word ought means should. It's just fancy English, okay? The is-ought fallacy, the mistake in logic, goes like this. It is true, so it should be true. Athletes are paid tens of millions of dollars, so they should be paid tens of millions of dollars. Well, maybe they should, but the fact that that's the way it is isn't really proof. Another way to put this is that's the way it is now, so that's the way it should be. If everyone always thought like this, civilization would never change, and we would still be living in grass huts. Okay, here are some examples. People bungee jump, see picture, so they should be allowed to bungee jump. Even though it has a higher accident rate than skydiving. Yeah, I don't know. Should they be allowed to bungee jump? I mean, you can make up your own mind, but the fact that it's allowed now isn't necessarily evidence that it should be allowed. Here's one that I think all of our opinions are becoming clear on. Not all states guarantee emergency room care to people without insurance, so they shouldn't care for people without insurance. This is a true statement, first part, okay? In many states in the past, people without health insurance are turned away in emergency rooms if they can't pay for their care. We are very lucky that we live in Massachusetts where that doesn't happen. Yeah, so that's the way it is. Ought it to be that way? Should it be that way? Should emergency rooms turn people away to go on and spread COVID-19 or die without care? Well, I think we can all agree that that should change, at least now during a pandemic, and hopefully forever. Hopefully we after this pandemic, we will decide that healthcare is a basic human right and that people should not be turned away. All right. Argument from ignorance. An argument from ignorance is any argument that uses the unknown, that's what they mean by ignorance, as evidence. So it's an argument that uses lack of knowledge, lack of evidence as evidence. And it doesn't make sense. It is very easy to show that it doesn't make sense. Let's take an example. Dad says, "We don't know when the pandemic will be over, so I'm sure summer camps will be open in July." Well, we don't know when the pandemic will be over is not actually evidence. Anything we don't know is not evidence. Because Mom could just as easily say, dun, 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 we don't know when the pandemic will be over, so I'm sure summer camps won't run this summer. We don't know. When you spot an argument from ignorance, it's not like you're going to spot that something is true or false. You're going to spot that something is still a maybe, even though someone is talking about it like it's true or false. Because sometimes we just don't know. Let's have one a little bit more serious. All right. Here's one that influences people even though it shouldn't. We're in a courtroom again. The defendant can't prove he wasn't at the club that night, so he must have been there. He doesn't have an alibi, so he must have been there. He's very suspicious. Yeah, juries are swayed by this kind of reasoning, but it's an argument from ignorance. All he's saying is we don't know where the defendant was, and then making a claim for that, but we don't know. Maybe he can't prove he wasn't at the club last night because he was sleeping in bed. And wow, this kind of thinking must be why the burden of proof is on the prosecution, and that is written into our Constitution. Because yes, the people who wrote the Constitution knew about arguments from ignorance. In fact, most of these fallacies have been around since the days of the ancient Greeks. They are thousands of years old. Because even as our civilization changes, it turns out that what is logical and what is not logical doesn't change that much. And of course, here's my favorite. You can't prove there aren't aliens out there, so there must be. Well, no. We don't know if there are aliens out there or not. Maybe there are. I'd like to think there are. But, it's not that there must be, okay? The fact that we don't know isn't proof that there is, and it isn't proof that there isn't. It's just a maybe, even though I would really like to meet an alien. The fallacy of the continuum is a fallacy you have to keep in mind mostly when you shop. So there are a lot of videos online that deal with the fallacy of the continuum differently, but we're focusing on the part that I think is most relevant to your everyday lives. And that part of the fallacy goes kind of like this. Everything exists on a continuum, so just a little more doesn't matter. That's the mistake. That's the untruth. In fact, a little more can matter. The truth is, even small amounts add up. So let's look at some fallacies, some untrue statements. Well, a lot of them you see when someone's trying to sell you something. Buy an extra year's warranty for only $9.99. You've already spent $89, so what's the difference? The fact is, the truth that you've spent $89 has nothing to do with whether you can afford $10 more and how much that $10 is. Okay, the sales ploy is to make you feel like because you've already spent so much, the warranty or whatever extra little thing they want you to add is so little it doesn't count. But in fact, it counts just as much as that much amount of money always counts. And the fact that you've spent $89 is not evidence for whether you can afford $10 more or whether you can't. It's totally irrelevant, okay? But we feel like when we've already spent a lot, just a little more won't matter. But that's the fallacy of the continuum. Sometimes the fallacy of the continuum can be applied to situations that don't involve money. For example, I know smoking can kill you, but I only smoke a pack a week, so that's not really smoking. Actually, it is. It's 1 pack a week, and it's 52 packs a year, and it's 104 packs after 2 years, and, it builds up. The tar in your lung builds up. Little amounts build up. Okay, but we like to think because the amounts are little, they don't matter, but they do. Here's another sales ploy. Buy a pastry with your coffee once a week for only $3, and you'll receive special coupons. $3 is nothing. Well, $3 might feel like nothing, and you might be able to afford $3, but they're not really asking you for $3, are they? They're asking you for $3 times 52 weeks a year, times however long you do it. Okay, little amounts add up. You have to think about the whole cost. And of course, it works for whatever else we're trying to get out of either. I'll skip exercising or homework just this week. I'm so busy, he said for the 10th week in a row. Okay. Yeah, every time you decide to give yourself a break and skip exercising or skip homework, it seems like it's so little. What is it really going to matter? But of course, if you keep doing it over and over and over, if it's part of a continuum, okay, then it adds up and it really does make a difference to your life. Oh, and look, and I forgot that the text becomes black. So we'll just go through that really quickly. Okay. Our last one is phantom distinction, sometimes known as distinction without difference. Phantom distinction is a bad excuse. Okay. Is it the dog ate my homework? No, even worse. A phantom distinction is a distinction that isn't even real. That's why it's called phantom. And our little ghost is wondering, am I even real? No, you're not. I'm sorry. You're a phantom. Okay? That's what they mean by phantom. A distinction that's not real. And a distinction, of course, is a difference. So a phantom distinction is pretending there is a difference between two ideas when actually they are the same. Unfortunately, it's not really possible for me to demonstrate this without saying some offensive things. You know I don't mean them. I don't mean them at all. Okay? But the way this is used in real life is as an excuse for people to get out of being called labels that they don't want to be called. And so we don't want you to fall for that. I'm not a white supremacist. I just think white people built this country and should be allowed to run it however they want. Yes, you are a white supremacist, because the views you just aired are white supremacist views. But this guy doesn't want to be labeled that in his news interview, so he says he's absolutely not, a white supremacist or a Nazi, even though he's marching with a Nazi thing on his shirt. He makes a pretend difference between what he thinks and this bad label he doesn't want people to use. I'm not sexist. I just think it's the woman's job to stay home and not work until the kids are ready for elementary school. So much better than thinking they should stay home forever. Women are so much better at dealing with little kids. No. Men are just as good at dealing with little kids, if that's what they do all day and have practice at it. This is a sexist view. This person just doesn't want to be labeled sexist. But the idea that, women are better suited to childcare, and of course their jobs and career paths are less important, is of course a sexist view. I'm not anti-Semitic. That's the word for those who are against Jews. I think Israel should be abolished because it's racist. I mean, yeah, the U.S. has racism, but that's a whole different thing. This one we hear in the news all the time. It starts out with, I'm not anti-Semitic, and then it goes on to say that the state of Israel should be abolished because of various problems that are also problems that many other countries have. Except, of course, if you're a Jewish country, you have to be perfect or you don't deserve to exist. Okay? That's the anti-Semitic part. Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned some fallacies, even though I'm not your teacher. I'm just a woman who cares about you, believes in you, and grades your paper. Phantom distinction. And by the way, I'm not a zebra. I'm just black and white striped member of the Equus family. But definitely not a zebra. We believe you. We believe you, zebra. Equus. Zebra. We believe you. Have a great day. And do the activity to practice these 6, because next week we'll start practicing all 23 together.